right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. And today, joining us, I am excited to be speaking with naturalist, thought leader, and author of Before Orion, which deals with some fascinating topics. I don't think we've really ventured too far into this topic before on the show, but I'm glad we can and hopefully get into this topic more in the future. So, without further ado, Bernie Taylor joins us. Bernie, it's a pleasure to meet you. Pleasure to have you on the show. For folks who are just learning about you, can you give us a quick introduction about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. Well, Mark, thank you for the invite. We're both um, guests of Grimerica, good friends of the program there, and that's how we connected. Thank you very much. So I do something differently than everybody else in the world. Um, I look deep into the Upper Paleolithic, tens of thousands of years ago, to see the source of astronomy, of mythology, of art, and how we came to be who we are. Some people, talk about, Siberia, or they'll talk about Africa and these sort of places in, thousands of years ago, or or nearer to the future, the present. But I go back tens of thousands of years ago. And this program today, which I've never done before, some of the images I've played around in the past have been out there, but I've never done this program before. And this would be a good one for your crowd because you're going to hear things that you've heard other people speak about from different perspectives. You can hear about shamanism. You can hear about the altered states in the caves. You can hear about the theories of art history and how we came to be who we are, how we came to this point. So this is going to be a complete overturning of everything you've ever heard, unless you've read everything I've written and watched every podcast I've done and every conference I've given. I'm I'm not in academia. I'm not really on the alternative. I'm definitely not on the alternative side. I'm in the middle. I've given presentations at more than 30 academic conferences. So these are the places that archaeologists go to make their case. And conferences in archaeology, astronomy, mythology, psychology of religions, um, and many other areas, disciplines. And my perspective is that everything is older. My perspective is everything is tens of thousands of years older at the very least. And the evidence is in front of us if you can see the evidence. And that's where we're going to start today. We're going to do a program, rewriting art history at Chauvet, but we're going to rewrite the human consciousness at the same time. Mark, you saddled up and strapped in?
I'm ready to go. Take it away, Bernie.
Okay, make sure of that. This is this is going to be a program. So the Chauvet Cave is we'll call it in southern France. Um, and the 2 points of contact where people might know would be Montpellier and Marseille. So we're just north of the French Riviera, the land of Grace Kelly, To Catch a Thief, that sort of thing. Um, and outside the Chauvet Cave, it's most known for other than the cave, and prior to the finding of the cave, it was known for the Pont d'Arc and this huge arc that a river runs through it. Um, and people swim in it. They run kayaks through there. It's kind of a really cool place. It's been known forever. And many people believe that they chose the cave because of this unusual rock formation. Because there's lots of caves. I mean, there's hundreds of caves that people could have uh, put art on, but for some reason they chose this one. There's a replica of Chauvet too, because the Chauvet cave is closed. It's been closed since it was found. Okay, very quickly it was closed. Um, and a replica was made right nearby the cave, completed in 2015, 55 million euros. A lot of money went to this. This is one of the jewels of French archaeology. This is the Louvre of Upper Paleolithic cave art. This is what the French talk about in addition to Lascaux. It was discovered or rediscovered because I don't believe any of this stuff was actually discovered um, in 1994. And one of the speleologists or cavers was named Chauvet, and that gave us the name. There are many chambers inside this cave, and we're going to sort of walk. At the bottom is where we're going to walk in, and we're going to sort of work our way to the back. or the top of the screen. Most people know Chauvet. In fact, you might know Chauvet from Werner Herzog's movie Cave of Forgotten Dreams. Did you see that one?
Yeah, I did quite a while ago, but I have seen it, and these are pretty popular if you're, broaching the topic. When I was a kid, I remember seeing these in books and such. I always was reading, reference books, and this would be a common depiction that would be in there. The horses, I remember very clearly. Yeah.
We are going to step light years beyond the Cave of Forgotten Dreams, which is a well-made movie cinematography or videography. But from a substance standpoint, I I don't see it. We're gonna break this up into four sections. Um, and the first section is Homo spiritualis. We'll talk about another theory of art, reflections of the outer world, and walking the dog. And only the first part of that was covered in Werner Herzog's movie. Homo spiritualis. You probably have a lot of listeners, podcast watchers who think about this concept, spirituality. Um, well, prior to spirituality or very early in cave art study, which goes back to about 120 years ago, there were archaeological approaches to studying cave art. And one of them was the techniques. In this case, you see these finger drawings, this styling, dating of cave art. How old is it? And in France and Spain, where most of the cave art is, there's a lot of rivalries, a lot of national prejudices. Who has the oldest? Who has the most beautiful horse? When you travel these caves and you travel to the part of the world, you're going to hear it. It's just a thing. It's just like you've heard Göbekli Tepe, the world's oldest temple, right? And it's not. But anyway, So also they counted the animals and utilitarian uses. Could people have done something, had fires in there and all that sort of stuff? And these are the ways that people sought to understand cave art. One of the approaches that came up was through the Abbé Henri Breuil. And the Abbé is a priest who doesn't have a parish. That makes sense. And he was known as the father of prehistory. And he believed it was hunting magic. The problem with his hunting magic hypothesis was later recognized that there's there's uh, there's a lot of reindeer bones in these caves, but there's very few reindeers depicted. So it might be like 1 or 2% of the characters, the animal characters, are reindeer, whereas it's just loaded with bones of reindeer. So what they were eating or what they were hunting had nothing to do what they put on the walls of caves. But that was a hypothesis. And I think that the good Abbey wasn't completely honest. Um, and he saw things that I know he saw things because he had better eyes than I did, and he was closer to them, that he decided to overlook for his own prejudices. Jean Claude has been the major figure in modern archaeology of caves, not just in France, but really in the world. And he's still kicking. He's very active, and he was the general inspector for archaeology. So what Jean Claude said was the truth. Okay, and Jean Claude was the lead researcher for the Cusco Cave. Um, and which is below water, about 30 meters below water, just off of Marseille. And he was the lead researcher for the Chauvet Cave. And he's an absolute titan in archaeology. People in archaeology, cave art around the world know if they haven't seen Jean Claude, they know who he is. They know what he's all about. And Jean Claude brought about the concept of Homo spiritualis, which is a fictional species. They say we're spiritual. Whereas we go back to the Abbey, the good Abbey, he said it's hunting magic. So the good Abbey was not in the position psychologically and spiritually to accept that there were spiritual people in the deep Paleolithic, that people could have had gods before Abraham. Okay. And Jean Claude teamed up with Davis Lewis Williams, which is the name you may have heard. And together they wrote a book and wrote many papers, The Shamans of Prehistory. And David Lewis Williams said that was light deprivation in the caves that brought in altered states of consciousness. Have you ever heard that narrative?
Yes, I have. Yeah. It's funny because it's something that comes up with relatively unexplained structures here in America, particularly the Northeast, we have these stone chambers, and one of the theories is that they would have used them to go into a trance, light deprivation.
And that came about in the modern sense from David Lewis Williams. I'm not agreeing with him. I'm saying that's where it came from. And he teamed up with Jean Claude. Um, was and the word they used was shamanism. Well, shamanism means frenzy. It's a word that the Russians gave Evenki people in the Tungus region of northwestern Asia. So shamanism is the very distinct word for a people that are, but it has been applied all around the world through the work of Jean Claude and David Lewis Williams. That's where that was the wide dissemination. There were some people before them that proposed shamanistic techniques around the world, but these two really set that in motion, that concept. And David Lewis Williams wrote another book called "The Mind in the Cave" in 2002, and again he further brought out this concept of light deprivation hallucinations. Problem with David Lewis Williams' book and work is that he mostly didn't study cave art. He studied art outside of caves, not near any caves actually, wall art in South Africa. And this is an example of the San rock art in South Africa. So there's most of his data, most of the information that he drew from, people were not in altered states of consciousness from light deprivation. Because that's not where he got his, that's not where he did his study. So he took a great leap with the Upper Paleolithic cave art and said, well, this is what it is. And what happened was the other archaeologists said to Lewis Williams, they're going to say it's drugs because nobody's going to buy into this light deprivation thing. Okay, and you've heard this narrative. Actually, here's the question, Mark: have you heard this narrative before that light deprivation from altered states then became um, sequenced into psychedelic substances?
No, not in that way, but I have heard that, things like Amanita muscaria and spoiled, rye, which creates ergot, these are speculated psychedelics. And, there are some evidences of ancient cultures using what we think are, mixtures of certain plants. But as far as I know, there aren't many conclusive like links to psychedelics in particular cultures beyond a certain point.
Exactly, you're actually right. And so it's been popularized, and you'll hear from many people that there's um, cave art comes from Amanita muscaria, magic mushrooms, and other substances, but there's actually no evidence of it, and there's also no evidence that there's altered states from light deprivation in these caves that spawn the art. So where did David Lewis Williams get this idea from? I mean, so David Williams read the work of Wilhelm Bleek, who's a German linguist, and Bleek interviewed a number of San people who were prisoners in South Africa. And what he did was he invited them over for dinner on Sunday nights, and he interviewed them. And for as long as they told him what the prisoners such as Cabo, as long as they told him what they wanted, what Bleak wanted to hear, he kept feeding them. So this went on for a extended duration of time. And so anthropologists like shake their head at this one, and they totally don't buy into the Bleak hypothesis of and so everything that we have from Bleak is highly speculative because he was effectively bribing them to speak, and so they had time outside of prison to eat a nice meal. And that's where that comes from. Well, there's other theories of art, and we're going to approach another one right now. And this, what we learned right now, leads to a pop quiz in about 10 minutes, so you probably want to pay attention. Okay, okay, just make note. Now, another theory of art came from Andre Louis Gorin, and he was a French archaeologist, anthropologist, absolutely brilliant. Doesn't mean he was right about everything, but he was absolutely brilliant. I'm a great fan. I have his book. It's about 3 inches thick. It's a massive table book, 3 inches thick. It's thousands of pictures. Um, and he said that cave art is about style. Of course, he's French style, right? Okay. But he said there's different styles. The first style is very primitive. It basically marks in the caves or in rocks, and those were the oldest styles because they were simple. And we start from child starts by, you know, you know, drawing their finger on a piece of paper, and they ultimately make Picasso type works as adults. We all wish we could, but that was the concept. It all started with the simplicity. There's no themes, there's no symbols, there's and animals are very crude. And that so he said that 30,000 to 27,000 BCE, the art was style one, and it's very crude. Okay. And then he said there's a style two, of course. The style one, you have to style the style two because you don't have negative numbers. And he said the Gravettian and the Solutrean were 25 to 18,000 BCE. And in this case, we can start to see animal figures. We see horses. You can see a horse in this one. There's a lot more to this image than a horse, but you can see a horse in the bottom third, and the horse has its head turned to its right, looking back. Um, and we can see lines that, we can see the neck, the withers, and the back. And so that's style two. So 25 to 18,000 BCE. Completely makes sense. Okay. And then we have style three, let's go, the other great French masterwork or cave system. And that's Solutrean and early Magdalenian, according to the style three, 17,000 to 15,000 BCE. And there's Lascaux is called the Sistine Chapel of the Paleolithic. At least that's what the French say, right? And if the Sistine Chapel, which is obviously a temple, how can Göbekli Tepe be the world's first temple? Right? Logical. Okay. All logical on this sort of stuff. So he said style three. You can see the forms. You can see a pregnant horse. We can see some flora near the belly with stylistic geometric marks on top. And so he called this style three. We're approaching great art in the world, in the idea of Andre Gorham. And then style four, which is our last style, was the Magdalenian, 15,000 to, so whatever, probably about 12,000 BCE. And they didn't really have a very good concept of how to date art at that time. So these dates are kind of fluffy. Okay. Kind of. And so he's saying this is photographic reality. Okay. Okay. So here's our pop quiz, because I warned you, Mark, and you were paying attention. Okay. So Chauvet's cave style, we have these horses, which you've seen before. You've seen them many times. Would you say that based on the styles, would you say that are we near to the 30,000 BCE or the 15,000 BCE?
If we're
This is photo.
qualifying,
This is high art. This is
yeah, I would say we're later in the timeline because this is more photorealistic than style one or two, definitely. So yeah, it's definitely in the latter.
exactly. So based on Andre Louis Gorham's concepts, you would be right on the money. Not pop quiz. Okay. So we have this bunch of lions, and you can see the lions in motion. We can see rhinoceroses behind them, and one of the rhinoceros has its horns or antler is moving. Um, so would we call this towards the 30,000 mark or the 15,000 mark based on the styles?
Yeah, it's different than what we just saw for sure. Maybe in the middle.
Interesting. That's good. You are observant. You would be a great student of archaeology,
Thank you.
except that there was then dating of the Chauvet Cave. And it turned out there was a landslide. The most recent was 22,000 years ago. So everything had to be earlier than 22,000 years ago. And then they took 88 points of contact all around the cave, and they found there are two habitations, 37 to 33,000 years ago and 31 to 28,000 years ago. So everything's earlier. Okay. The established artistic styles of Andre Louis Gorham, who was otherwise absolutely brilliant, completely disproven. Every theory about the development of art was turned on its head. And Jean Claude is very happy because he now has the oldest dated cave art in the world. And it's magnificent. It's beyond what anybody could have imagined when they found it. He has he has the Louvre. Now, there are many archaeologists at that time, they were furious about this thing. And I'm not dishing on archaeologists because Jean Claude's an archaeologist, right? So there's difference of opinions, there's theories of thoughts, there's camps of ideas. And some of them said this can't be possible because we have to rewrite our old books that they were selling. Absolute truism. And I can name those people, and I don't have to name them. Okay. People can Google if they want. It's pretty easy to find who they are. So there's a lot of controversy, but Jean Claude was right. He always said this is older. He didn't say it was older because he had any scientific evidence for it, because he was French and he excavated this cave. Of course, it had to be older, but he was right. He's very happy. Kudos to Jean Claude. Okay, so now we're going to step to another part three: reflections of the outer world. And the reflections of the outer world, we're going to look inside the cave, which is partly looking inside the Paleolithic mind that I would say is our own. So, by the way, you didn't fail the pop quiz. You passed the pop quiz based on the styles and what people believed at that time. But things change. Things change. So here we are on the panel of the little bear. Can you identify? This is not a quiz. Don't worry. No more quizzes. I can promise you. No more quizzes. Okay. So, Mark, can you identify the animal?
Well, it's a brown bear if we're talking about Europe.
That's good. Yeah. Okay. It's a brown bear. Okay. That was an easy one. Not a quiz, just a question. Okay. Well, there are lots of bears in the cave, both bears who are depicted on the walls and bears that scratch their place in the cave. And archaeologists, John Clott's team actually, did incredible work by layering, starting from the earlier bear scratches and the painting that or engravings to a painting that came on top of it. And we can kind of see this sequence in these images. Tremendous amount of work, brilliant archaeology, and it was really old. Um, then there's a horse sector, um, and in the horse sector to the viewers left, you can see those famous horses. You can see some oryx on top of it, and we see this little alcove. Really cool stuff. Now, I haven't been to the Chauvet Cave, and I will never go to I probably will never go to the Chauvet Cave, um, because it's completely closed. But based on images I've seen of people standing in front of this art, the if you're 6 foot and you had your hand raised as high as you can, there is no art that goes over your hand. So there's no art, I would say, that goes over 9 feet. Okay. But I have not been to the cave, and I cannot say so. Um, but I've been to many other Paleolithic caves, and it's really cool. And I hope I inspire some people to go go to these places. Now we return to the horse that we had the pop quiz about, and in the so-called panel of the horses, um, and the panel of the hand stencils. There's lots of negative and positive hand stencils. Negative hand stencil is when you've put your hand on the wall and you've chewed on the red ochre and you've spit around it. Okay. A positive hand stencil is when you spit on your hand and then you press it against the wall. Okay. Lots of hand stencils, and you can see both right and left hands. And these are all positives. All positives. Cool stuff. And they mean something. I did not study the question of what they mean in the Chauvet cave. I did study the question in other caves.
Real quick, based on the size of the hands, the shape, are we able to determine anything about the height, the age, the any other characteristics
Yes.
about
Yeah.
the identities of the people putting their hands on there?
Yes. So statistically, looking at all the hand stencils, the this was either a adolescent. These were the majority of them were either adolescents or they're female. And you will see books about cave art and about history of humans, all that sort of stuff, that scratch out the adolescents and say it was all made by females. And I'm not disputing any of that females made the cave art or didn't make it. makes no difference to me. But the narrative of the adolescence sort of got washed away. And I would say that my perspective, based on other caves that I've studied and the images in them, where we actually can see adolescent males. I mean, they are clearly adolescent males next to adult males. That was these caves were some sort of initiation rites. They were the passage. So I would say that I would not discount that there are females who worked on the art in these caves, but based on the images I've seen, I would say that they're mostly adolescents as a rite of passage. That's what I would say.
Another quick
And
question before we
sure.
move on. You mentioned the red ochre and that it would be chewed before applied.
Mm.
Now, is this the primary artistic medium? And then also, is the reason why we're seeing this red ochre preserved is that because of the environment of the cave, whereas maybe in other places it would be weathered and maybe aside from like a desert, we might not see these types of petroglyphs because, like, I'm wondering, yeah, how does red ochre be preserved like that? Is it
Absolutely. So they're outside of a cave. Red ochre would be some sort of binder agent. Um, so it would stick to the wall and it would stay there, but it's still not going to stay there for very long outside the cave and the elements. Within the cave, um, there may or may not be a binder, but it would stay on the wall without the binder. So why do people use red? Um, well, we live in a blue-green world, and when you're driving down the road, you see a red stop sign. And when you see that red stop sign, something is triggered in your psyche that says danger, danger, danger. Stop, stop, stop. Okay. And so the red is psychologically spiritual. Okay. There's studies done with three spine sticklebacks, which is I don't want to say a minnow, but it's a little bigger than a minnow, has these spikes on its back. And trout eat the sticklebacks. Um, and they found that the trout would be more responsive to feed on the sticklebacks that had a red gill than those that did not have the red gill, even though they were equally, how to say, equally offensive to eat or difficult to eat. Okay, and so the animals are attracted to red. Okay, and here we have the panel, the engraved horse. In this case, you have a horse that they used a finger. They wet the finger, right? And then they went around and they pulled off the material. And what's very very interesting about this technique is that it doesn't stop throughout the entire line. That's a really important concept. You can't be on drugs doing this. You can't be having any light deprivation. This is um, this is intentional, conscious art. Picasso is very famous for doing this light art. People can see it is on YouTube. Um, and he was mimicking the Paleolithic cave art by having continuous lines with his light pen. So this is done through these holding the finger throughout the entire sequence, and the archaeologists can tell that they did that because you can see where things start and stop. Right? It's one of those things. So this is highly intentional, conscious art. A closer look at the same image, you can see where it stops and where it doesn't stop. And where it stops is where the artist creates features in the art around the mouth, the chin. It's really cool stuff. This artist knew what he or she was doing. Okay. And that same horse is part of a larger panel. We can see mammoths behind it. And the mammoths are indicated by the humped head. Okay. Really cool stuff. There's also scraped. We have scraped mammoths here. So the entire panel that someone actually, I don't know if it was a finger or some sort of tool, but it was clearly scraped off. And the archaeologists did a study by Jean-Claude's team, the layering from beginning to end of these scraped mammoths. And what's very important about this panel, which we're going to revisit later, is that the artist utilized natural curvature of the wall to make the underhead of a mammoth. Important concept. So he used natural pareidolia. He found the artist found the mammoth in the wall. Okay, so like I think it was Michelangelo said that he found um, the his subjects in the marble. Okay? And here's a reindeer, one of the very few. In places where there are reindeer, where there's reindeer in cave art, they're mostly in France, but it's very rare to see reindeer. Okay, with alcove of the lions, you can see there's a lion mixed in with a red on its breast, a female lion mixed in with some horses there. We see a rhinoceros. We see there's other characters on this panel that I have not studied, but there's definitely other count because you can see the scraping off. Lots of rhinoceri. I'm not sure if the word is, and they all look different. So when people say, um, "Well, this is what looks like a pillar cave art," well, the rhinoceroses in Chauvet Cave look drastically different. So there is some styling of the animals. Cool stuff.
Do you think that would maybe signify the relationship these artists had with this rhinoceros? Because it does seem like in most of these, the rhinoceros is charging forward, and there's a lot of emphasis on the horn. Maybe this was like a considered a threat, and
Mhm.
that's why they're emphasizing or exaggerating rather the horn.
Unquestionably. So you have male and female rhinoceroses. I'm very good with horses, deer, and but I'm not very good at rhinoceros, male and female. Um, but yeah, there's definitely sex differences, but there's also clearly the stance of the animal as the artist saw um, the image in his or her mind. And so you have horns down, you have horns up, um, and there are clearly different stances um, and how the placement of their four legs, the four hooves,
Right.
without
But
unquestionably.
the other interesting thing is like I guess the instinct is that oh, rhinos charge with their horns, but maybe these are other species that are not quite the what the modern rhinoceros is because
Mhm.
from what I've learned, a lot of these species ungulates they evolved to have these horns pointing towards their back because their main predator were big cats, which primarily tend to jump on the back of their prey. So they needed a, sharp, pointy thing, to scratch their back, so to speak, right? So that rhino up in the top there, that's kind of what I think of when I see that. Like it almost seems ridiculous to have a horn that long on the front of your nose, but if there's lions about, you might yeah, poke them off with that.
Absolutely. And none of these would be African rhinos.
Right.
Uh, these would be perhaps woolly rhinoceroses. We can see to the viewer's right center, we can sort of see the hair and the scratches and the lines. When this was reproduced, they did not focus so much on the hair itself. But absolutely, yeah, unquestionably. There's an ibex. Ibex are really cool. There's ibex still exist, and we can see the the long horns. Cool stuff. Now here's an interesting panel, and this is one I have spent years studying. It's called the panel of the dotted animal, um, and you can see all those red dots. Um, what we can't see very well in this image is that there's actually a lot of lines behind the red dots, because the the focus was on those objects in the foreground. So we lost the detail behind the red dots. One could, I don't believe, Jean Claude, by the way, Jean Claude gave me this image. So I was giving a presentation about that I photocopied from his book, and he said, use this one. Okay, he sent me the image. So he apparently has some give me some thumbs up on my interpretation. But what the photographer is interested in is huge. So in this case, the photographer is looking for the bigger picture. Um, but where you focus on, you can determine more detail. In this particular, um, all those dots were made by somebody's right hand, actually the palm of their right hand. So they spit red ochre and they did this. Um, and apparently one of the fingers is off in one in these, and that they could identify that it was the same artist. Okay. Now we're going to go look some images. We're going to compare them, the Chauvet 2 replica, with what we've just seen with the panel, the so-called panel of the dotted animal. And the panel of the dotted animal has not actually been, I don't think anybody's formally recognized what kind of, in fact, animal it is. And this is the dotted panel animal at the replica, which is really cool. I mean, this is far beyond what I could have done, and they did it through some sort of digital scanning. Okay, but remember, as a photographer, as an artist, you reproduce what you see or what you intend to see, what your focus length is. So now we're going to compare the Chauvet actual Chauvet cave with the Chauvet 2 replica. And just kind of, this is not a quiz, okay? Not a quiz. First time you've seen this. Is there anything that strikes you as being different?
Well, we don't have the stalagmites or tights, whichever one
Mhm,
comes up from the ground. We don't have those accurately portrayed, which
mhm.
seem like that's the context that's important there. And then beyond that, it does kind of feel like it's not exactly in the same place.
Fair, fair.
As far as it seems like it's been shifted more towards the right of the
Mhm.
actual rock background itself. But
The
no,
photographer shifted his perspective towards the right. Yeah,
okay,
for
yeah.
sure.
So yeah, no, other than the foreground features, I don't notice anything.
Fair. And nobody else knows anything either, just let you know. So you would have been a great archaeologist on this project, except there's a program called D-Stretch. And what D-Stretch does is separates colors. Okay. Um, and with D-Stretch, it's really good. You can see all this red in this the so-called dotted animal. They did a really good job of recreating those reds. Using D-Stretch, do you see anything different between the two?
Yeah, the shape itself has shifted a little bit. Now I'm kind of seeing almost like a more pronounced shape with the actual cave rather than the replica.
Fair. That's fair. That's good stuff. You have Mark, you have good eyes. So what about there?
Ah, okay. That's
So
supposed to
there's a lot
be
of
a
missing red,
figure,
isn't
like
there?
a person there.
There's a lot of missing red though. That so the how we can see it is through D-Stretch and the missing red. Okay. So what we can see in the replica is they however technique they use, the computer generated technique, they did a very good job of transplanting the features in the rock, but they missed the red. Okay. And so we can look a little closer at that red. Interesting stuff, right? So okay. And my interpretation, it's the you can see a left and right eye. There's a mouth, there's a shoulder there, and come off the top of its head looks like a dunce cap. It's in fact the long beak of a waterfowl. So this is a shape, some sort of shape shifting character. That's my read on it. It's my read. Um, but it's important because this guy is looking out at the so-called dotted animal. Okay. There's a relationship between the two. You could call him the sorcerer, you could call him the magician, you call him anything you want, but he's looking out on that on the animal. So we can let's look at the comparison again, and you see the our new sorcerer, right?
Yeah, I see the eyes and the mouth. It's very clearly the side profile of a person
Mhm.
with a hat on. Yeah, that's fascinating. Now you
So I
said,
would say that this calls out Jean-Claude's Homo spiritualis, that we have some sort of spiritual character interacting with whatever the panel the dotted animal is. I've done a study on it, but it's its own episode. I'm gonna tell you that. Okay, it's really cool stuff. Its own episode. So let's go to another part of it. Let's go to the
Mhm.
top left hand corner of that of each one of those. Do we see any differences between these two?
Yeah, for sure.
So in
There,
general, what's your what do you see in general?
well, we have an actual shadow in the mix in the cave, and then the replica. It seems like they've kind of flattened out and taken out a lot of the definition. There is the actual shadow and the shapes of the rock implying figure as well in that pareidolia sense that you're talking
Well,
about.
that's you're on the right track, and what you've said in the last 30 seconds is that it's not an accurate portray or imitation from the Chauvet cave to the replica because the replica is washed out.
Yeah,
So the artists or the archaeology artists who created the replica, they weren't interested in what was outside of this panel of the red dots
right. They
because that was their
close.
focus.
Yeah, they have a very narrow focus on the dots, not noticing that that is actually a part of a larger scene going on here.
Exactly. And
Wow.
so what do we see here?
Huh. Interesting. I'm glad I'm not wearing my raw optics blue light blocking lenses right now, although I probably should. Otherwise, I'm straining my eyes. But the yellow tint would probably make this even more difficult. But yeah, no, I'm kind of
Cool stuff. We're going to
seeing.
go to the next one. Ready?
Yeah. Okay.
Now look at it.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So we got
So
some
we
more
have this
features
teacher
here.
sort of character and the apprentice with
Yeah.
two heads. Then we have this really cool head with its the all-seeing eye because I and you see a mouth there as well.
Right.
And you can see the hair for both the teacher and the apprentice. The
Wow.
apprentice has a floppy hair and has got kind of I don't want to say sideburns, but it kind of Elvis. It's an Elvis look. Let's put it right. It's um,
Now, is this a pareidolia
oh,
instance
it's there. It's
where
there. Yeah.
it was sort
Eh,
of seen and then captured in this way, or do you think that the artist actually went in and sculpted the
The
two?
artist carved it out.
Okay.
Absolutely, the artist carved it out because the and part of the reason is we can see how much it differs from the Chauvet 2 replica.
Well, yeah, of course. It's
Now
funny
it does.
that you mention it. Yeah, it has literally none of it. It almost kind of looks like the fake rocks you see at like a mini golf course or something.
So did the artists see some sort of pareidolia that they built upon? Possibly, but they clearly built upon it because we can see the cheeks of both the teacher and the apprentice. We can see we see the mouths of both of them, and we see the mouth and the eye of this. If it was just one character, I'm going to tell you, yeah, one way that let's flip a coin on it. We've got three characters next to each other, and what is the character? What I'm calling character X have absolutely no idea, excuse me, what that person signifies. But I would call out a teacher and apprentice for the man and the adolescent.
Yeah.
We have an adolescent because
Yeah.
we see a difference between the size of the shape of the heads as well as features. The boy has it's a boy. The boy has his big cheeks um, and the teacher is sort of speaking, whereas we do not see the adolescent speaking.
Yeah. Wow.
Stuff. And I have those two together in many caves.
Huh.
Cool stuff. So the
Now
teacher
that,
and apprentice does we can't say it equals shamanism because I've thrown that whole unless you're in the Tungus region of Siberia, I don't use the word shamanism. But it clearly could equal spirituality. We have this relationship. And so we have multiple characters that had not been identified before because people weren't looking those directions. So they didn't have eyes like a deer, right? We have eyes like a deer today. But really cool stuff.
Let me ask you
And then, by
about
the way, there's
the
more characters there that we're not doing today, but there's
yeah.
definitely more.
Well, let me ask you before we leave this scene, the dotted animal. I know you said it would take a whole nother conversation entirely to get into that, but just entertain briefly, is that possibly a winged creature that we're looking at, the dotted
That's
animal?
what I will say is you have at least five animals on top of each other,
Okay. Wow.
and that's and what this here is actually the top of the head of a horse, and the mane comes down here. You got an ear coming up, and the horse's head comes around like that, and this becomes a leg of the horse. Um,
Okay, yeah,
and
I
what
did
the
not
artist did
see.
was there's lots of lines in here that we can't see in this
Right,
image,
right,
and
right.
the, they made the um,
It's funny now that you have pointed that out, there is now more of a distinctness between the shading of the red on the right hand
yes.
side than the left
Oh,
hand
Mark, you're
side.
good. You're good.
Yeah.
You're good.
Wow.
So
So
clearly, so
they're observing the
unquestionably,
scene
there is a
there.
difference between the shading between the viewer's left and the viewer's right.
Yeah. Well, because at first my instinct was that what we now are seeing is the rear end of the horse might have been the front of a being, and that was looking directly at the figure we see observing what must be an interaction between multiple beings, as you're saying. So, okay,
Yes.
wow, interesting.
So we're
So,
shape shifting. We're
y-
clearly shape shifting.
yeah,
Cool.
okay,
So John Clot, Homo spiritualis, a fictional species. He's right. He's 100% right. He didn't he didn't know it at the time. He had a concept, but he didn't have the evidence for it. He went around the world looking for shamanism. But John Clark, brilliant. This is what should have been in the Werner Herzog movie. This is the stuff, right? Okay. So we start at the bottom of the cave system, which is the bottom of the screen, and we're moving up to the top. And typically in the back of the chamber is where the really cool stuff is. It's just one of those things. So it's the deepest chamber of our psyche, of our mind. And there's this common panel or feature called a sorcerer's panel. And we have a bison that is, you know, frontal to a lion. And people say that that's a woman's vulva in the middle. I'm totally unconvinced. And the reason I'm totally unconvinced is because I've seen all these I've seen these things across Paleolithic cave art, and in most cases, I found that there's a source for that vulva someplace, so-called vulva, someplace else that had absolutely nothing to do with a vulva. But this is considered to be it's vulva. Some archaeologists say yes. A lot of female ones say absolutely not. That's not what a vulva looks like. But is clearly integration of animals on this unusual um, shape. And this ancient chamber behind the so-called vulva. We find predators and prey. We have all these lions, and going back to what you said about about the rhinoceros before, is there's different stances of these lions, and you can see them. Their heads are forwards. They're on the hunt. They're clearly on the hunt. And in front of the lions, we see these oryx or bison. We say that's a bison, and I'm not sure if this is a. I think that's a bison. Okay, but we can see these the predators and the preys. So this is an integrated scene across this panel that the artist had in his or her head before stepping up to the wall and then seeing it there. Because we can see some of the features here. The back of this bison um, melds in with the curvature of the wall. So the artist saw the wall and found the bison. Fun stuff. Fun stuff. And we can look at those lions, clearly on the hunt, different facial expressions. We also see this unusual character, it circled in yellow, and it is a mammoth. It's a mammoth, um, and kind of a closer look of the mammoth, and people say that's a baby mammoth. Let's That's what a baby mammoth looks like. Okay. So um, I don't disagree with that interpretation. I think that there's more to this story than that just being a baby mammoth because its belly just doesn't look right. Okay. But there's I don't know what the story is, but yes, it's a baby mammoth. But there's more mammoths there. We can see the trunk and head of mammoth one. Behind it, we can see another head, and below the first trunk is a second trunk.
Right.
So just like we saw these layering of um horses and rhinos and lions, we see layering of mammoths.
Now, we know that primitive hunting techniques included things like what would they call it when you run animals into a certain corner or
Mhm.
blind spot and you have people set up ahead. Could this be a sort of strategy displayed where they're sort of like teaching maybe younger men as they become initiated into the hunt, like, here, look, this is how we learned these techniques from watching the lion
Mhm.
prides kill these big predators. Now we survive thanks to learning from these lions.
Unquestionably.
Wow.
These people are animists. They're learning from the animals, but the animals aren't animals in their minds. They're brothers or sisters, they're aunts and uncles. Um, they are, they're in the animal family. Do you have a cat or a dog?
Now I do not, but for many years of my life, yes, I had a cat, and
Did
yeah,
you name your cat?
yeah, yes, I did.
Of course, you named your cat. And so you named your cat like you would name a child, another human being.
Right.
Did you celebrate the cat's birthday
Well, we adopted
or
our,
something like that?
so no, I don't think we knew their birthdays. They were found in behind a an abandoned gas.
Okay, okay. But they were family, weren't they?
Right.
Did you
Absolute.
ever worry about the health of your cat?
Oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Did your cat come up and cry to you when you gave your cat a treat or a pat in the head or something like that?
Yep, yep. They're
Okay.
part
You're
of
an
the
animist, Mark.
family.
You're an animist to the core. Okay.
Oh
These
yeah.
people were just they weren't animist with their cats, their those cats. They were animist in the larger family of the animals in their environment that they learned from. Okay. But yes, you are true disclosure today on the podcast. And
Well,
yes, your family thinks you're crazy.
yeah,
Yes.
well, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. But then also, and to that point, and we see it still preserved in indigenous cultures around the world, the notion that, these are our brothers and sisters, but then also knowing that, we're surviving off of them, like to eat the deer,
Hmm.
eat the mammoth. I mean, yeah, that this is how they survived.
Absolutely. Yeah, no question about it. And in fact, we were probably scavengers before we were hunters. So we scavenged off. We brought out a bunch of sticks and we chased off the lions or the hyenas or the cheetahs or something like that. Um, so we were definitely scavengers. We didn't start by going out and killing meat. We started by, picking up things off the ground that were there, and then chasing away our competitors. But unquestionably. So here's an interesting one. This is I think one of the most important images in the whole cave. It's a mammoth. Okay, at least one mammoth. Is probably a rhino on top of it. And what's interesting about this mammoth is that the rear or the hind legs of the mammoth are formed by the natural curvature of the wall. Similar in concept to we saw with mammoths earlier, with the scraped off from the walls. Okay? The artist found the mammoth in the wall. They saw the pareidolia, and they built on that pareidolia for both the mammoth and the rhino on top. So you can see that spot with a natural curvature of the wall. Interesting stuff. Okay, and we can compare um, that mammoth to the baby mammoth that we saw
This
earlier.
was
And that baby
found in
mammoth
the
was
ice,
is
right?
from Russia.
Right. What this was pulled out of the ice. It was preserved in the ice over. thousands of years, the calf?
Pull it out of yeah, the on the ice or tundra or something like that. Yeah,
Wow.
but absolutely, 42,000 years old. Carcass found in the Russian Arctic.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we can look at the baby mammoth to a skeleton of mammoth. Baby mammoth doesn't have its tusk left, and we can compare to a model of a woolly mammoth, and we kind of say we're good. I mean, it's not perfect. None of it's perfect. I mean, even I'm sure that even the skeleton has some artistic interpretation. And the model woolly mammoth is it's you can see the humped head, you can see how the legs are and the hindquarters and things like that. Kind of. So now we're going to look at another panel, and this is the first time I've never discussed this one on a podcast, in a conference, anywhere. This is the first time I've ever discussed this one in public. And what do you say? This is not a pop quiz. Don't worry.
Well, on the left-hand side, under the cluster of red hand palm prints at the top, I see that hump that we just focused on, the elephant, the woolly mammoth's sort of
You're
humped
good.
skull,
You're
and
good,
then
Mark.
the
You're
imprint
good.
of
You're
the
good.
eyes.
And that is the so what we see in that case is it looks like there's some natural pareidolia, and then they carved out that piece at the top.
Right.
That's you're good. And it's natural pareidolia because we can see all the those lines that striation lines that come down. Okay. So how's that look?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So
Isn't
now
that good?
now we're
Fun
seeing
stuff.
almost like is there multiple mammoths there now or
There's
just
probably multiple mammoths.
yeah,
Yeah, I would say so.
kind of see the
I'm making the argument that there's at least one mammoth, okay,
yeah,
at this point in
right,
time,
right,
which had not been previously. This had not. Nobody observed this one before. I can say that
right,
one, because the people who do keep count of these things did not have this mammoth in the count. And yes, there's probably multiple mammoths in the mix. When you can see it compared to the woolly mammoth model. Fun stuff. Okay. And how we can on they are uneven surfaces, and some of the surfaces there's a natural irregularity lines that they carve that was in the wall. They smoothed out some surfaces, so they found they accentuated areas of this to give the full features of the mammoth. In some cases, it was just by smoothing out to make it um, more figurative,
right.
and you can see they're engraved lines as well. So this was typical. This was called the panel of the dominoes. Um, this is the first time that in public. So we should it's
Now,
never discussed. I'll do it in a pot. I'll do it in a conference later. But I'm off conferences for the next year because I'm working on a larger project.
wonderful. Well, my
Yeah.
question is, we have this sort of, I don't know, maybe it's a misnomer, maybe not, but we have this name cavemen that gets applied to people from this time period. And would these caves have been places they were habitating? And if so, is this equivalent of like today how we decorate our home? Or are these caves considered, from what we can tell, maybe more of a ritual site, places that people only visited during certain? Because that seems like the implication that you were suggesting, not you yourself, but that David Lewis Williams and they had kind of inferred that it was a sort of ritual site that you would go through some sort of, you know, absence of light and then hallucinate in the absence of light and then possibly with the help of psychedelics.
Yeah. And so a few answers to that question. The first answer is that these were ritual centers. People did not live in these places. And I'll show you in a few more slides how we can actually tell that. And the second part of it is that, well, actually, we're going to answer the light deprivation one in a few minutes. But the answer is that these were ritual centers for sure,
Right. Right.
unquestionably. We can also see that, early we had that the mammoths that used the natural curvature of the wall. So this was done before in other parts of the caves. So you and I just not make a major discovery. This is a concept. Um, and so let's look at back at the Pont d'Arc. Give me your deep feeling, Mark, right now. Just put it out there. No reputations, just
My instincts when I see this natural wonder is sort of reference to the underworld, sort of the earth and the river Styx sort of coming out from
mm,
underneath the from the underworld,
Milky Way, good stuff.
inner and outer worlds. Yeah, okay. Like a gateway.
Yeah. So they probably chose the cave system not based on the walls of the cave, but rather they saw the pareidolia or the mammoth in the Pont d'Arc.
Ah, okay, now I'm seeing it. So the arc itself is like the underneath of the mammoth.
Pareidolia mammoth,
We have the top of the head over there towards the left. Yeah, now I'm seeing that. Okay.
which they replicated, they've also refound in the cave
Right.
in three different cases with mammoths.
Well, it's funny that this is coming up because just couple months ago, I had a gentleman, Mike Wilkerson, on the show, and he has a very alternate take on the matter. But nonetheless, he's identified a mountain, an entire mountain in Spain, which, pareidolia or constructed somehow through a vast carving process. He's found a mountain in Spain that, according to him, is anatomically accurate to what we'd expect to see if a gigantic elephant died and fossilized into a mountain, which again, that's a
Uh-huh.
huge speculative stretch, but maybe you're familiar with this site. I think it's
I'm not
insane.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with what he's talking about, but
Yeah.
in Basque tradition, they believed that the mountains were alive, and the Basque were the people in northern Spain.
Wow.
And this type of scenario, actually, I'm going to go to the next slide. I'm going to go 2 slides later, and you're going to see it. Okay. So we see the mammoths, the same concept, and now we're going to northern Spain and Asturias, Spain, and there's this. Everybody has seen that mammoth with the so-called heart on its side, and that baby mammoth. There's no heart on its side. Okay, it's not a thing. Um, but that mammoth in the cave is actually a copy of a pareidolia mammoth right outside the cave. So if you walk 20 feet, you can see the pareidolia mammoth. You walk out of the entrance, you can see the pareidolia mammoth from the cave. It's a replica outside the cave. And there's not just one, but there's a second mammoth, a larger mammoth in the foreground. So I enhanced it in the middle image with D-stretch.
Hmm.
So all across northern Spain, we have this concept of pareidolia outside the cave that was refound in the cave on the walls. I've got bears, I've got mammoths, um, and these are all still sacred sites among the Basque people. Except this one is not in Basque country. Okay, and this is a few hours to the west of Basque country. But the baby mammoth was seen outside the cave and then refound in the cave in the same way as we found in the Chauvet. They weren't drawn to this cave, El Pendal, in Asturias, because there's great walls. They were drawn to it because of the pareidolia outside the caves. So looking at this from the perspective of light deprivation, David Lewis Williams, this wasn't about light deprivation. They saw it outside the cave. That's how they decide to make on the walls of the caves. And in many cases, so in these two cases I've given you, it's right there, right? I mean, but I have many instances where the pareidolia is a week or two walk from the cave. And there's no freaking way they were on psychedelics, they had light deprivation. They saw the image in the outer world. They saw the animals. They saw the pareidolia animals in the rocks. And that was spiritually significant to them that they recreated it inside the caves. The temples aren't in the caves. The temples are a combination of the inner and outer worlds.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. That's animism. That's animism. It's actually the sky world too, but that's out of the realm of this presentation today. That's another, it's its own animal. Okay. So you asked the question, um, did people live in the caves? Do they walk around very much? Well, we actually have in the Chauvet cave, we have prints of a human, of a boy walking around the cave. Okay. And apparently he walks a dog because right next to his footprints is that of a canid. Okay, a dog. People say maybe it's a wolf, and I don't believe it was a wolf. Okay. Um, and we can look at this image, this drawing from the Chauvet cave, and to the viewer's top right, we can see circled in red, we can see the human, the boy's footprints that remain next to circled in blue, the canid. We don't see the boy's footprints throughout the cave, but we do see it right next to the dog, right? The canid cave. So, and so there's been this discussion. Well, did people have dogs back then? Well, people who work in the anatomy of dogs say no way. Dogs only go back 10,000 years or so. But people who work in the genetics of dogs, of canids, say the common ancestor of the domestic dog and the gray wolf was 35,000 years ago. We don't know what was before the gray wolf and the domesticated dog. One of these images in the cave could be it. We'll be there in a second. But domestic dogs appeared at the same time as the Chauvet cave time period. That boy could have been walking with the dog. And I'm completely convinced he's walking with a dog. So we're going to look at some dogs in cave art from that time period to see if it's possible. So I studied dogs. I studied canids. And what you'll find across the world of canids is that domesticated dogs, there are no wild dogs with or canids with the canids, so like wolves, with the ears up. I'm sorry, the ears down, the ears down like a lap. So you might find domestic dogs with ears up, but you'll never find a wolf or another wild canid with its ears down. Doesn't exist. Okay. So what I would say, as a baseline, is that if you see a canid with its ears down, it's a domesticated dog. You might see canids with its ears up, and you could say, "Hey, that looks to me like a domesticated dog." But let's flip a coin on it. But ears down, I'm calling it as domesticated dog. So we're going to look at some quick caves here. 35,000 years ago, the El Castillo cave, Cantabria, Spain, and we see this canid. Can't tell if the ears are up or the ears are down. I can see outlined to the viewer's right. I don't know. Maybe it's the common ancestor of the two because it's about that time period. But I cannot tell you the ears up or down. So we'll call it an unknown, is domesticated or not. Here we have a Spitzish dog, and you know it's a Spitzish dog by how the tail flips on its back. And so whenever you're walking down the street, you see the tail flipped in the back. It's a Spitzish dog. Okay. Okay. And so in this case, the ears are up. Was it domesticated or or wild? You know, don't know. Don't know. Here we have a Swiss mountainish dog. Okay. We have ears down. And we have the same panting of the tongue. Same panting of the tongue. Really cool stuff. I'm calling this a domesticated dog. Okay. Another cave, Gorham's Cave in Gibraltar. And by the way, I've been to this one here. I've been to this cave. I've been to this panel. It's in Cantabria, Spain, and people can go there. You have to make reservations in advance. Here we're going to the Gorham's Cave. Gorham's Cave has this panel. It's on a table sort of top rock. And these are my hands. That is the size of the panel. Okay, so it's scaled. And it looks like two hands. You can see the metacarpals. And here we see three dogs, three canids with the ears down. Looks like a Majorca shepherd dog, a very rare dog. Okay, but again, we see dogs with the ears down. So I'm saying they're domesticated dogs. Okay, and here we has look at Aswad dog, some kinds of Aswad Slohi, a North African dog. And by the way, the one before the Majorca is they're islands on the off the east coast of Spain. Okay, so we're in the ballpark, right? Aswan dog, it's got the star on the side. There's one behind the other. I'm calling these ears down domesticated dogs. Here we have Canary dogs. Again, we're in the Canary Islands, which is just to the west of Spain, southwest of Spain. Okay, we're in the same geographic ballpark. We're not in we're not Siberia. Okay. And we have these overlapping of the dogs. And if someone looked at these overlapping of the dogs, they might say it's a three-headed dog. And it's possible like the Cerberus could be. Okay. On the same panel, we have this ears upish dog. I would say it's some sort of a wolf. Some unknown canid. It's not domesticated. So what do they do with all these dogs? Why was the kid walking around with a dog? Well, dogs are really useful. Dogs can help you to track down game. They can help to sound their alarm. Have you ever been a big game hunter, Mark? I can't hear you.
Sorry. No, unfortunately, I have not. I know you mentioned Grimerica show, and we know Darren has hunted, but not. I don't big game. That would be what any animal over a
Elk,
certain weight, I imagine, right? So elk, yeah,
elk,
big
big
game,
deer.
big game, sure.
Yeah.
Not
The
me.
toughest part, I was a bow hunter for many years. The toughest part of bow hunting is finding the animal. Okay. It's not sticking an animal. It's actually finding it because it takes time for the animal to to perish. Right word for that one. If you have dogs, which is illegal in Oregon where I live to use dogs for hunting, you can find it pretty darn quick because the dog can sniff it out. Um, well, they were using dogs for hunting, not maybe some case herding the dogs for sure and driving the dogs off a cliff or something like that. But clearly, to find the game that they did not have a drop to the ground kill shot. With those canary dogs, you get a hunted bear. I mean, big animals. The dogs could have actually taken down the animals. Okay. So there's all kinds of things you can do with a dog. Um, One of the oldest dogs in the DNA record is actually the Spitz dog. So it's possible that you know we're looking at one of the earliest dogs with the Spitz dog in the gallery of discs. So dogs existed before we made them into domesticated dogs. They had all these features. And what we did is we took the dogs that could herd the best and made them herd dogs. We made the dogs that could hunt the best and made them take down bear. So back to your question about 20 minutes ago is were these sanctuaries and what did people walk around in them? Well, in the case of we got this boy walking around with his dog. And I would say, but we don't have lots of, I mean, those are the only human prints we can find. Um, so very rare, even though the caves were utilized. Now, people in this time period also had moccasins, a moccasin like we call moccasins, and which would not give this print that we have of this young boy. So yes, these were sacred spaces. They were sacred spaces that people found or refound the art from the outside of the caves, the animals in their world, the animistic relationships, through the pareidolia outside the caves that they brought into the caves. Nothing to do with psychedelics, nothing to do with light deprivation, but clearly spiritual, because there was an inner cave and then there's the outer world. And to these people, they were all connected. And you can go to some of these caves. It takes some doing, but some planning. A bunch of them in northern Spain, so Cantabria, Asturias. Um, and you can go to La Pileta, which is down by Malaga, southern Spain. Most of the big Lascaux and Chauvet have been closed forever, but there's other caves in France. There's Grotte Pernon Père, which is just near Bordeaux. Um, and but yes, people can go to these in many of these caves and see the visions, and then they can walk outside the caves, and you're not going to see many orcs running around outside the caves or lion. You're not going to see any bison, that's for sure. But
Right.
you can see this outer world. Should I
Fascinating.
stop sharing now, or do you want to go back to any screens?
No, I have some questions, but no,
Sure.
we don't need to continue sharing. If one of my questions jogs your memory and you want to bring a screen back up, that's fine, but we could turn it off for now. The
Okay.
mountain I was talking about is Montgo Massif, which is in Spain in the Marina Alta region north of Alicante. And it says
I'm
right,
actually very interested in his work and that concept because it's similar to what I'm
well,
with
and
Pareidoia. It's outside the cave.
you should look into it. His YouTube channel is Stellium7. I could send you a link so you don't need to write it.
Send me because I don't have a pen
Yeah,
with me.
I'll send it to you. But it's funny because it's not his original idea. It says right here on the Wikipedia page that the side of the mountain is often said to resemble the head and trunk of an elephant. So he's clearly a proponent of it. But yeah, I don't think he originated that.
Can you share me that picture right now?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I want to see it. In Basque believe that everything was once alive.
Let me find a better picture because the one on Wikipedia doesn't really do
Yeah.
justice.
Yeah, I definitely want to connect with him. Because what I want to look at is, does that pterodactyl in the mountain match with any mammoths in caves?
Oh, and
That's my interest.
nearby and within the
But
mountain
there's
itself.
they're all over the place. There's around the world. Um, indigenous peoples find pareidolia in the geologic formations
Oh,
that they
absolutely.
find myths about. And one of the
Absolutely.
ones you'd be familiar with the Devil's Tower in the Black Hills.
Right.
Everybody's familiar with Devil's Tower.
Yeah.
Well, Devil's Tower is a Lakota traditional place where, in their narrative, there were children being escaping from bears, and their hero character lifts the children up through that large pillar that is Devil's Tower. And as the children being lifted up, the bears are scraping down on the pillar, which gives us those striations.
Right.
So it's a similar concept. Throughout the Black Hills, there are many geologic formations that the Lakota view as um, their spiritual cosmos. The what we call Devil's Tower, is Black Bear Butte, which to the Lakota is also seen in the night sky as the constellation Gemini.
Hmm.
So their earthly plane is mirrored in the night sky, and the upper pillar of the cave ars had the same thing. That was its own presentation. Um, and as the Lakota moved around the Black Hills from the spring to the summer solstice, they would stop at each place that they then saw, or pareidolia site that they saw into the night sky as a constellation. And the last spot at so-called Devil's Tower is where they had their Sundance ceremony, which is the completion of the cycle.
Hmm. Hmm.
This is these are common ideas among indigenous animistic peoples around the world.
Right. Yeah, it's something that I saw. Well, unfortunately, it was too foggy to get a good look, but we were up in New Hampshire and near the man on the mountain. Uh,
Yeah.
and the old man there. And coincidentally is where Betty and Barney Hill got abducted. There was a state historical sign right there on the side of the road. That was sort of interesting to run into. But yeah, one of the things that I have been looking into is the ancient history of North America that, for the most part, has been ignored. There's been a few authors that don't have the best reputation because of the speculation they make, but there's certain sites around. the Northeast that have stone chambers that I mentioned earlier. And then one stone in particular that I have as my background here, I can share my screen and show you this photo. And it's clearly to anyone looking a sort of a bird, right? I
Hmm.
consider this
Sure.
as a sort of a bird. It's really large. If I was standing next to it, it'd probably be about 5 feet from the base that it's sitting on to the top there. And I don't know, several tons, I'd imagine. And then on the left side of it is sort of the face of a bear. I didn't see
Hmm.
that
I see
until
the
they showed.
pareidolia in that for sure, 100%. And
Yeah,
it's possible that somebody chipped away the past. I
yeah,
so animistic peoples, the people who are naming their cats, right, and celebrate the cat's birthday and scratch the head when treat them like family members. They would. It's not just the animals; it's the geological formations. There, the rocks are alive.
right.
What you're seeing there, the mountains are alive. In the case of the old man in the mountain, who is pretty much mostly fallen off. Benki people, I believe it's the Benki people in New Hampshire, they had a prophecy that it would fall off. Okay, and that was part of their creation story cycle. So if you see it, somebody saw it before you, and someone before then, and if they were closer to the animism side than we are, it was alive, it was real, and it became part of their mythology, their natural places,
Mm. Yeah.
their cosmos.
These things have been immortalized in stone and within the, safe, hermetic seal of these caves, which is so fascinating. And the point about the dogs, I just wanted to ask, because you mentioned the ears being significant. Was there a point in time when man, in order to domesticate dogs, you know, strap their ears down or maybe put a muzzle on them or something? Like, is this possibly, is there a theory as to how domesticated dogs' ears lost their stature?
There's no theory at all.
Huh.
You looked at the oldest images of dogs, period.
Right.
It's just a few minutes ago. No, I don't believe that we domesticate dogs. I believe that dogs are already doing what dogs do.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
You can let your cat out for a few weeks and the cat would have been just fine figuring out
Well,
what
and we
cats do.
we see symbiotic relationships in plenty
Yeah.
of other species in all different environments all over the world. So, yeah, humans clearly found a symbiotic relationship with dogs at some point in the past, and that's stuck with us.
I would say that dogs domesticated us. And this is
Interesting.
how I see it. And that we start off as scavengers. Okay. The, the the dogs and the wild dogs in Africa took down a gazelle. And we went over with sticks and we chased them off. And then we gave some of that meat to the dogs because the dogs can't eat all the meat of the gazelle. Okay. We gave them some meat. And we found dogs that were just some dogs are more amiable to us than others, the ones with the ears down, possibly, and some with ears up. And then that became our symbiotic relationship with the dogs. So I would say that dogs domesticated us versus the opposite.
Wow.
The dogs taught us about family relationships because brother wolf, you've heard from Native Americans. Okay. um, we did not domesticate dogs. The dogs saved us. And when we came out of Africa, we had this amazing companion, and anybody that was in our way, any other species such as Neanderthal, didn't have it. So we could track down game, we could find the game, or bad hits, right, bad sticks of the spear. Major advantage. We had alarms for when the predators came near that would scare off the predators.
Hmm.
Neanderthals had to stay up at night. They had to walk endlessly looking for their kill. Um, if they had to herd animals, they physically had to herd animals, whereas we could run animals down with dogs. And at the end of that kill, we gave pieces of the meat to the dogs. The dogs were protected by us at the same time, and the dogs reproduced more prolifically.
Hmm. Wow.
So I would say dogs domesticated us.
Right.
It's out there.
No,
Hey,
that's
it's a crazy
fascinating.
podcast, right?
No, I love it. Now, when it comes to the horse, domesticated much later, and after I imagine the cow, but are there any, based on what we see, there were horses depicted, oryx, which are sort of a precursor to today's modern
Hmm.
cow or bull, and you know, were there any inferences that we could make to our relationship with those animals, or were they just on the menu for us at that point?
Oh, they would. So horses were not big on the menu. It's mostly reindeer. It's almost like they could walk out and just take down a reindeer. My guess is that they in Siberia there are reindeer that people herd, and there are reindeer that are on their own. In in Alaska too. Okay. The caribou in Alaska, it's the same animal. Um, so they probably, I would say that these people were herding reindeer. Okay, that's what I would say. So going back to the question of the horse, that's a really good one. What we do have is we have very natural looking horses, such as you saw on these panels, but we also have humans that overlap in the horse, such that the humans are not on the back of the horse, but the human is on the neck of the horse. So the human has spiritually taken on the form of the horse, and that where we derive our centaur. There's one image that we ran through that was from Grotte Père non Père that I didn't I said that was a horse, but there was actually more too. In fact, it's one of the ones where the man overlaps with the horse and becomes a centaur. So the answer that is that we spiritually connected with horses by learning from them in an animistic way, whereas we did not domesticate the horse 30,000 years ago.
Right,
They were our brothers and sisters, not our slave.
right.
And the auroch, um, I don't see anything like that. But clearly, the horse, we were, and we drew strength from the horse, and we became in the way of a centaur. And this is not shamanism, but in shamanic traditions in Siberia, people have a horse dance, and they mimic the horse, and they take the spiritual leader then rides that horse into the other world to meet other shamans who give him or her special abilities to come back to help her people, you know, cure the sick, that sort of stuff. But when they do that, they just don't take the horse. They will transform into many animals along the way: a loon to dive in the water, an eagle to fly high, and that's all part of the dance that these shamanic people do in Siberia. And we find that same tradition in Upper Paleolithic cave art, because when we find these cases of the individual who overlaps with the horse to become a centaur, we also find that the individual who's male, takes on the beak of a bird. Okay? So it's never just the horse when there's these overlapping characteristics. There are multiple there are multiple animals to take that individual to a different place, the
Yeah,
in between places.
that's fascinating. It's interesting that the horse might have been, yeah, like this astral travel, a metaphor for that, or
Oh, it's Pegasus. The
yeah,
horse became Pegasus.
yeah,
Unquestionably, the horse became Pegasus. Because what I have another conversation is that these are constellations.
mm,
Not in Chauvet, I can't do the whole thing, but in other caves like El Castillo, I can take you through most of the Greek constellations, the same characters in the same order. Um, you could see who they are. I mean, it's not rocket science.
well, and I imagine that's what's alluded to in your book before Orion. Before we knew it by that name, we thought of it possibly as man in the sky, the hunter, the father with the bow and the arrow, this sort of patriarchal figure. Is that sort of what? Is that?
Absolutely, yeah. It's unquestionably. So we could call that. So interesting patriarchy is that on the panels where we do have these characters of the man integrating with the horse and all this sort of stuff, um, the man integrates with a lot of animals, and in almost all the animals that the man integrates with are female, and in every case, the man actually becomes the sort of the, so the apprentice or being taken care of by the female animal. So is it matriarchal or is it patriarchy? The man is clearly learning from the female. And the only animal that I could see that the man actually kills is a lion, which becomes Hercules and the Nemean lion. But we don't see that in the Chauvet cave. Um, so the answer is it matriarchy, is it patriarchy, or is it some integration of the two? Because they're not thinking along the lines of male versus female. They're animus learning from other animals, and the animals to best learn from to survive are the females as they take care of their own young, which the apprentice does on his or her journey. On the terrestrial plane, the cave walls, and in the night sky.
Right. Now, you sort of alluded to this earlier, and I've read that secret societies have an origin in our ancient past, and it is associated with the knowledge of how to read these what we're looking at today, this art, that this would be passed down from father to son or mother to daughter, etc. And the different lessons on the cave walls became the secret societies that we think of today in all their different various historical forms.
No question, unquestionably. They probably passed it down. They weren't geneticists, but they would have recognized that their genetic abilities. So Mickey Mantle, both, his father was a ball player. Pele's father was a soccer player, right? The There are genetic abilities that we pass down to our children. I'm completely tone deaf, therefore I cannot play a musical instrument. Okay, so but there are other people in my family that are tone deaf too, but they'll never admit it. Okay. Um, but you great musicians pass on to their children, mathematicians, and we have artistic art is also a genetic ability. Picasso's father was an artist. They say Picasso, could draw by the age of 3 or something like that. Picasso's father taught him to draw by the age of 3, and he had the abilities to see these sort of things that we're looking at the caves today. And Picasso, I'm not going to say he drew heavily. Picasso completely ripped off images from cave walls that he put into his cubist um, recreations, because Picasso had the ability to see this pareidoia and recognize the characters, not just the horse, but recognize the horse as an animistic figure, that as a female. Um, and then what Picasso would do is Picasso would say these animals, he would tie them into the political figures of his time. The bull would be General Franco, the horse is the Spanish people. And that's his art a is an echo of Paleolithic cave art, animism in our deep past.
Yeah.
And that's a genetic ability. Everybody can't do that. These images that you saw today, when like the man before I looked at these stretch, I saw the sorcerer in red. Okay, if I saw the teacher and apprentice and that the guy with the big eye. That I don't know what it is. Character X. I saw those right away. Okay, it was just they just jumped out at me. And most of these cave images I've worked on, it's the same thing. That's a genetic ability by the way that I see imagery. Okay, but at the same time, I'm completely tone deaf. Okay, um, I have um, I have genetic abilities that perhaps these cave artists had. But I don't have other abilities that might make me a virtuoso pianist or something like that. Um, so we all have strengths and weaknesses, and some people are on different ends of the spectrum of weaknesses and strengths. Um, and I believe that the cave artists, they had these secret societies, like you suggested, that they were passing it down to their children. And among indigenous Americans, they'll say, and actually they won't say it, but it's part of that tradition, is that you always know who the mother is. And so the uncle becomes the teacher because the uncle has the same genetics as the mother. Okay. And so you're passing down these traditions through the uncles, not through the fathers. And you'll find that in traditions throughout the world of people who recognize genetic abilities of um, spatial abilities. People can see the stars, they can find all the constellations just like, in a blink of an eye. versus people who can sing and dance really well, which is a completely different thing, as I can attest to. And more people should attest to that because they're horrible singers.
Fascinating stuff. So, Before Orion is the title of the book. You have beforeorion.com. That's your YouTube channel. Is there anything else that you would like to direct the audience to? Obviously, beforeorion.com is a website that
Sure.
you should go to.
And, and my webpage is beforeorion.com as well. So people can go to the webpage and they can see the conference videos and presentations and
Right.
um, links to podcasts, I'm short, 2 minute shorts and hour-long presentations. It's all there. Um, and I use ResearchGate and Academia U. I use all the social media channels. Um, it's all free. Nobody needs to buy a book. It's all free. It's all accessible to the public. And people just dive in, explore, find your path. And I hope people can visit some of these caves, especially in Spain. It takes a little time, some reservations and planning, but you can go face to face with these. And you could see just incredible images. You could also travel to cave rock art across North America. Actually, not across North America, but the western part of North America. There's a lot of rock art,
Mm.
um, and the sites are well documented. Next trip to Vegas, you can find some place to go, or Reno, um, and experience some of these things. Find
Wonderful.
your vision.
Well, thank you so much, Bernie. I appreciate it. And I'm inspired. I love researching what's in my own backyard. And I definitely have yet to go out west and see what's waiting there, but I look forward to it. So thank you. And to the audience listening, follow up with Bernie. He's got so much more on his YouTube channel to dive into, tons of presentations just like the one we got today. So, again, thank you so much, Bernie. I appreciate it. And with that, folks, thank you for tuning in. And until next episode, immerse yourself in the moment wherever you are in the now.